So I want to talk today about cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. And it will surprise precisely no one here that insomnia is usually the major symptom reported for those with tinnitus. And it's also the case that cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, is the single most effective treatment for insomnia. So there's obviously some interest in this topic, in this crowd. For those of you who know something about cognitive behavior therapy, you might be surprised because actually CBT is a relatively small part of the whole therapy. But I want to start not with talking about CBT, but talking about insomnia. There's actually a very technical definition of insomnia. These are the four components of it. There's a difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or non-restorative sleep. This difficulty is present despite an adequate opportunity and circumstances to sleep. The impairment is associated with daytime impairment, and sleep difficulty occurs at least 3 times per week and has been a problem for at least 1 month. And there's actually a scale to measure the severity of it, and you might want to check your own insomnia out here. So just there's 7 questions. Here are the first 3. So rate your difficulty falling asleep, your difficulty staying asleep, your problems in waking up too early on a scale of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. From none to very severe. Take a second, write it down. And then let's go to the final 3 questions. Final 4 questions. How dissatisfied or satisfied are you with your current sleep pattern? 0, very satisfied. 1, moderately satisfied. 2, satisfied. 3, dissatisfied. 4, very dissatisfied. How noticeable to others do you think your sleep problem is in terms of impairing your quality of life? 0, not at all. 1, a little. 2, somewhat. 3, much. 4, very much. 6, how worried, distressed are you about your sleep problems? 0, not at all. 1, a little. 2, somewhat. 3, much. 4, very much. And 7, to what extent does your sleep problem interfere with your daily functioning? 0, not at all. 1, a little. 2, somewhat. 3, much. 4, very much. Add that all up and get a score to see how clinically significant your insomnia is. And if it's significant enough, you will probably be told about CBTI. So it's, let me just read the formal definition. It's a multi-component treatment for insomnia that targets difficulties with initiating or maintaining sleep, and is delivered over the course of 6 to 8 sessions. So usually 6 to 8 sessions. And it deals with what are called perpetuating factors according to the 3-factor model. And let's just get this 3-factor model of insomnia out. The 3 P's: predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating. So predisposing factors for insomnia are things that will increase your vulnerability to insomnia, such as emotional reactivity or maybe a family history of this problem. Precipitating factors, things that trigger the onset of insomnia. So let's say you have a kid, and that's going to mess with your sleep schedule. That could be a precipitating factor. And a perpetuating factor is a behavior or conditions that make this condition a disorder in the long term. So some long-term factor in your life. And that could be having a kid as well, which could perpetuate the problem if the kid has you off your sleep schedule, or working an overnight shift. So when it comes to tinnitus, tinnitus can both precipitate and perpetuate insomnia. So what we're going to work with then, CBTI works with, are 5 components. We're going to go over each of these. Sleep restriction or sleep restriction therapy, SRT, stimulus control or stimulus control therapy, SCT, sleep hygiene, cognitive restructuring, and relaxation techniques. And as you can see, CBT is a cognitive component. There's only one component of a multifaceted approach. So we'll spend the most time here on sleep restriction therapy, although it's more frequently called sleep consolidation because restriction sounds like a harsh term. So this is essentially the idea that one of the problems with insomnia is we stay in bed too much. We have what's called sleep extension, a mismatch between our sleep ability, how much we actually sleep, and sleep opportunity. So what sleep restriction therapy is an attempt to limit our opportunities for sleeping, for how much time we're in bed, for how much time we actually need to sleep. Let me explain that in a little more detail, and you'll see how we work with the sleep restriction therapy. I think it'll become a little more clear. So in order to determine, you're essentially trying to determine how long you should stay in bed, which is what sleep restriction therapy is going to do, and it usually is going to end up restricting the amount of time you actually stay in bed to the amount of time you're sleeping when the therapy starts. So we get a baseline. We have you keep a log for a week or two. And we start with a prescribed time in bed, and that's your sleep window. After we get this log, we use this to set a time in bed, how long you can stay in bed, and a time when you can get up, and those two together are going to give you a time when you have to go to bed. So as a result of this first stage, you're going to get a time to get up in the morning and a time to go to bed. And that's going to be set in stone for the duration of the therapy. So we're going to get this by having you keep a sleep log, and the sleep log is pretty standardized. And you can actually get apps with this that do all the calculating for you. So you're going to essentially put what time you go to bed, what time you try to start getting to sleep. You maybe read in bed for a while, and then you try to start getting to sleep. So those can be different. They can be the same if you try to get to sleep as soon as you get to bed. How long does it take you to fall asleep? How many times did you wake up before the final awakening? How much time did you spend awake? What was your total time? What time did you wake up for the last time, and what time did you actually get out of bed? And then you figure out how much sleep you got overall. So let's look at a specific example to make this a little more clear. So suppose you went to bed at 10:30, you read for a half hour, and tried to go to sleep, but it took a half hour. Then during the night, you got up a couple times, and it took you a while to get to sleep. It took you 60 minutes. And you got up at 5:30, but you really wanted to sleep some more, so you laid in bed for another hour. Now, you might ask, how do you know how long it took to get up? How do you know how long time you were awake? You're actually, because you're not supposed to time yourself. You're actually just estimating these because one of the restrictions we'll see is you don't use a watch in bed. So let's say then this was your log, and let's say just for the sake of the example, it was like this. For the week you kept a log. Right, you went to bed at 10:30, got up at 6:30, 8 hours sleep. Well, not quite, right? There's a half hour before you went to bed, actually. Another half hour before you got to sleep. That's an hour. You spent an hour up while you were in the middle of the night, and then you laid in bed for an hour. So you actually only got 5 hours sleep, right, if you add it all up. So that, for the purposes of the therapy, would be your baseline. So let's say you decide you're picking a wake-up time. Let's say you want to get up at 6 o'clock every day. Your actual to bed time would be 1 a.m., right? Because you got 5 hours sleep a night, so we're going to restrict your sleep time to the time you're in bed. And that's going to be the parameters. The wake-up time won't change. The parameters for the bedtime might change based on the following criterion. If you sleep less than 85% of the time you're in bed, then you get 15 minutes less a night for the week. This is done once a week. If it's between 85 and 90%, then it stays the same. If you increase to more than 90% efficiency, then you get more 15 more minutes of sleep. So you slowly hopefully increasing your sleep window because you're hopefully sleeping a little more efficiently. So this is really the core of CBTI, and if it doesn't have this, it's not CBTI. Right? And this you can actually the apps figure this out for you, and you can. It's not as complicated perhaps as I made it seem. So we can come back to that and ask questions. But while you're doing this, you always keep the same wake-up time. You're supposed to get sunlight upon awakening. Now, if you wake up when it's not sun, then you got to wait till the sun comes up, which is probably a good argument for trying to wake up with the sun. No naps. You're not supposed to be using sleep meds. Most therapists don't want you to use sleep meds. You can wean gradually off them, but generally you're advised not to use them. You're not supposed to check a watch or a clock. And if you're in bed more than 15 to 20 minutes, get out of bed and do something relaxing until you feel sleepy. And 60 minutes of relaxing activity, no screens of any sort before bed. So I said that's the essence, the heart of the program. The second component is a stimulus control, and if you all know, probably heard about Pavlov's dog. You understand the notion of stimulus control. Right? Pavlov gave his dog, rang a bell, gave his dog meat. Dog salivated. Pretty soon, after a few times of this, Pavlov took the meat away, rang the bell, the dog still salivated. He had become conditioned by the stimulus of the bell to salivate. So we want to, in CBTI, condition you to get tired when you see your bed. So we want to make that the only thing you do in the bedroom, sleep and sex. Right? So all other activities are verboten. Right? Bedroom is only for sleep and sex. And you want to get up if you find yourself you can't sleep for more than 10 to 15 minutes, because then you're associating the bed with being awake, and you only want to have the association of the bed with being asleep. So that's the stimulus control component. The third, now we get into the CBT, and this is this is the outline for the program, and I'm not going to spend too much time here because we're running short on time. We can come back to look at the program. So let's go back. Let's go through the steps. So the third step then is a sleep hygiene, and I think everyone knows the basic of sleep hygiene. Now you might not, like good nutrition, you might not do it, but if you don't know it, it's good to reiterate it. Establish a routine, create a relaxing environment, avoid screens, limit caffeine, exercise regularly, eat well, wind down before bed, limit naps, make your bed your sleep only zone. So in these, when we implement sleep hygiene alone, it's found to be rather minimally effective. But it usually has some effect. But we want to throw everything in the kitchen sink at the problem. And the main piece of and why it's called CBT is we finally get around to the cognitive piece, the cognitive restructuring piece of CBTI. It involves, like CBT in general, what we do in CBT is our emotions are caused by our thoughts. And so if we want to change our emotions, we need to change our thoughts. So the cognitive behavior therapy, the cognitive restructuring part involves changing our thoughts about CBT, thoughts about sleep. If you think about the problem, one of the problems with insomnia is you have a lot of fear that you can't sleep. Well, fear is driven by a thought. All emotions are driven by thoughts. So the model for CBT is we look at an emotion, and we recognize the thought behind it. And if we want to change the emotion, we need to work on the thought. So let's say, typical insomnia situation, you're not falling asleep when you want, and you just start panicking. Now, what's the thought in back of that is something like, if I don't get to sleep, I'm never going to make it through tomorrow. And that becomes a vicious cycle of you start panicking, and that increases the body's fight or flight response, which makes it a lot less likely you're going to sleep. So we need to tackle that thought, which is what CBT is all about, is tackling our thoughts. And you might, when I work with clients, I tell them, you don't have to worry so much about not falling asleep. We know there are meditation techniques, practices, yoga nidras that can actually provide 85 or more % of the restoration that we get from sleep. And once you realize that, you can calm down about not getting sleep. If you can't control your sleep, you can control a lot of the restoration process. So we work on really looking at some of the catastrophic thoughts surrounding sleep, look at how accurate they are, and look at how we can challenge and replace those thoughts, or perhaps work with those thoughts in some other way. And we can talk about mindfulness in this fashion as the component of CBT in this program. Finally, relaxation techniques, a whole slew of activities we want to learn and develop. Developing a meditation practice, using yoga, qigong, which are essentially moving meditations, developing some breathing practices that can relax. We know if you breathe out for more than you breathe in, you're going to relax. There are breathing methods like the 4-7-8 that we know bring on the parasympathetic nervous system and calm the body. Visualization practice, a specific practice called yoga nidra, which is actually a form of meditation more than it is a yoga. It literally means yogic sleep, and has been shown to be very effective in engaging in bringing about restoration of the body during sleep time, even when not sleeping. So this program, CBTI, is, I think, universally a success story. It's an overwhelming preponderance of evidence, as effective as hypnotics during acute treatments of 4 to 8 weeks, and much more effective in the long run. So this is the gold standard of treatment for insomnia. And there was an interesting study done in terms of working with tinnitus folks that essentially engaged tinnitus people who are having problems with insomnia in this program, and they found not only that insomnia decreased, but so did tinnitus distress. So all the more reason to really, if you're having problems with insomnia, to work this program. I would highly recommend it. So hopefully that will be something we can talk about. You can get a therapist to do this. There's not as many therapists who do this as we would like to have. But this review of clinical trials found self-directed CBTI programs were just as effective. So there's a lot of programs out there you can find. There's a nice app, I think it's just called CBTI, where you can do the tracking of the sleep log. There's a New York Times article which talked about CBTI. The book that I like, the non-technical book, is called Sleep Through Insomnia, End the Anxiety and Discover Sleep Relief with Guided CBT Therapy by Brandon Peters. And then the app is called CBTI Coach, which I would recommend. So that's a little introduction. Hopefully you find that helpful.